guys, welcome back to Quarantine Cooking. I'm Jennifer King, and today I'm going to make you a very popular dish that everyone's been asking me to make. It is my pot roast stroganoff, and it's going to be served with some egg noodles and a mushroom red wine cream sauce, which is to die for, that sauce. So the first part of this recipe is actually making the pot roast, and so that takes a while. So we're here early in the morning. We're going to get this in to the crock pot, and then later I'll be back to finish the dish with you. So let's get started. What I have here is a pot roast, and you might get different types of pot roasts that are out there, and that's fine. All pot roasts tend to be a little tougher of a meat, so they require more cooking time. So my pot roast usually takes between 3 and 4 hours, depending how I cook it. Today in the crock pot, I'm going to put it in for about 4 hours, but if I were using my oven, I would probably do it for about 3 hours at 350 degrees covered. And if you don't have a crock pot or Instant Pot or any of those pots that are out there right now, that's okay. You can still use your oven. You would just use an oven dish to put the pot roast in, and then you would season it like I'm going to show you how to season in a minute, and cover it with foil. Make sure you cover with foil so it keeps it moist, it doesn't dry it out. And then after about 3.5 hours, that's when your pot roast will be finished cooking. And it should be fork tender, meaning when you take 2 forks, you pull apart the meat, it should come apart really easily. And I'm gonna show you that later when our pot roast is done in the crock pot, how it just shreds up really nicely. So let's get started on seasoning our pot roast and getting it ready for the crock pot. The first thing I'm going to sprinkle on is some garlic salt. So that always goes on most of my meats. I love garlic salt. If you don't have garlic salt, you can use garlic powder. Any garlicky kind of seasoning you have would be great. Just adds a nice flavor. I also have some steak seasoning, and this can go on steak, pork, anything that you want to throw on a grill, but I found this at the grocery store. Any steak seasoning or a spice mix that you have would work well too. Next, I'm going to add some freshly ground pepper over our pot roast. And then about a pinch of kosher salt. That's what most chefs use in the kitchen. We talked about that the last episode. Now, it's always important, I believe, to season both sides of the meat. You'll hear chefs say that all the time because you really want the flavor to be incorporated all over. So I'm going to flip this roast over and give my hand a quick rinse here. And then I'm going to season the other side. So some more garlic salt, some more steak seasoning, some freshly ground pepper, and a little bit of kosher salt. All right, now I'm going to tell you guys my secret ingredient to make every pot roast delicious. And it's actually from my grandmother's recipe. And you see it at the grocery store all the time. It's the Lipton's French onion soup mix. So you take out the little soup mix inside, and we're going to put it all over. We're going to rub it all over our pot roast. It's so good. So I'm going to put half on this side, and you're going to get to know this pot roast. I like to kind of rub in all the seasoning all over, and then I'm going to flip it over again, add the rest of the seasoning. Oh, so good. This makes it amazing. And rub it all over this. Make it nice and happy, this little roast. Okay, so now we have our pot roast all yummy and ready for the crock pot. I'm gonna go ahead and put in the roast, big guy, and I'm gonna add all this yummy seasoning over it too, because we don't wanna leave anything behind. To finish off the pot roast before we turn on our crock pot, I'm going to add a couple more ingredients, and they're liquid ingredients. The first is tamari, but if you have a regular soy sauce, that'll work too. So I'm just adding a litto bit in there just to give it some flavor. Also some Worcestershire sauce, right? As Emerald would say, some Worcestershire sauce is also delicious with beef. You can add this to your hamburgers too the next time you grill. Delicious. And then to finish it off, we're going to add water to come up about halfway. And Andy, if you want to come closer so they can see in here what it looks like. We're going to add about a cup and a half, maybe a cup here. I'm just eyeballing about that much. You want it to come up about halfway on your pot roast. You don't want to completely submerge the pot roast. This will create a nice au jus or juice at the end that we're actually going to use some of that when we make our mushroom cream sauce later too. So we like that. We want that flavor in there. So gonna get this little pot roast started, about 4 hours in my crock pot on high because we want it to be done in time and we don't want it to go slow and low that long. If I was doing like 8 hours, then I would do it on a low, and you could certainly do that if you're gonna be at work all day. But since we're all home right now, we wanna eat around 5:30. So 4 hours on high, 4 hours on high, and then this little guy should be done and I'll show you what it looks like. Hi guys, welcome back. The roast is done cooking and I shredded it already. So it should be nice and shredded. Like I said, with 2 forks, it should actually just come apart really easily. I really like the pot roast that's the crosscut, it's called. And if you don't see it in the meat section at the grocery store, you can always go in the back and ask the butcher if they have it. And a lot of times they do and they just run out in the front. But I really recommend that cut of roast because it does come apart just so easily and it's tender and delicious. In this roast, I also kind of put a couple scoops of the au jus. You can see that the roast cooked in the liquid, and we're gonna add all that yumminess to our mushroom cream sauce in a couple minutes. So I also, in this time, got the pasta going. So I have my egg noodle pasta in here, cooking away, boiling away. I add my salt once the water comes to a boil, and you really want to make sure that you add salt to your pasta because that's the only chance your pasta is going to get to be seasoned. I don't recommend adding olive oil in there. A lot of times people do that with the salt, and basically what that does is it doesn't allow anything to stick to the pasta, so your salt is kind of pointless. What I would do with the extra virgin olive oil is after you drain the pasta and strain it, if it's going to sit for a little bit, you can always drizzle a little extra virgin olive oil afterward and toss the pasta just so it doesn't stick together and become really clumpy. So let's go ahead and get going on our mushroom cream sauce, red wine cream sauce. So as you can see, I've already started. This is a delicious Cab Sauvignon from Justin Winery in Paso Robles. Highly recommend, delicious. A lot of times people ask me, do I have to use a wine, a nice wine? And to be quite honest with you, the nice restaurants and cooking schools I've taught at and worked for have never used super nice wine to deglaze your sauces and to add flavor. I always say Chateau de Box, and people look at me, I'm like, yeah, box wine. Sometimes it's box wine, sometimes it's 2 buck chuck. What I always tell people is, if you don't mind opening a bottle and drinking while you're cooking and splashing a little in the pan, then go for it. Whatever you'd like. I'm sure there's lots of people that would contest that with me and say, oh no, I can tell the difference, and you might. But for me, just the flavor and the essence of the wine and the flavor I want for my sauces tends to work with whatever I have on hand. Let's get started on our mushroom red wine. Wine.
What is it? What is it?
Right? Too much wine already. Our mushroom.
Keep going. Just keep going.
Red
Work
wine
through it.
Cream sauce. How about that? Does that work? All right. So I'm heating up my pan, and I'm going to heat it up with some extra virgin olive oil, just a little couple swoops around there. We want just enough so that we can saute our onions and our mushrooms and let them get nice and caramelized and golden brown and delicious. GBD, right? We learned that last time. So how do we know the oil is ready? We talked about this too. The oil will start to kind of, I say, dance around the pan. You can see it kind of shimmers. But the main thing is when you add your product to the pan, you really want to hear that sizzle. If you don't hear that sizzle, then it wasn't ready to be added to the pan. So the first thing we're going to start with is our onions, and this is just going to add flavor. So I just diced up a regular brown onion. And I was telling Andy it'd be a great idea, I think, to do a little quick video for you guys on how to properly dice or slice an onion. I think that's something that a lot of people probably just kind of do, but don't really know if that's the right way to do it. So I'd love to teach you that maybe on a shorter episode. So it was ready. We heard the sizzle. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the onion. I'm going to kind of just move that around to let that get nice and yummy in that oil. Next, it's going in some mushrooms. And again, these are cremini mushrooms that I just sliced thinly here. So a lot of mushrooms in this stroganoff. And these are going to kind of cook down with the onions and get nice and golden brown and delicious. If you have garlic, again, we haven't been to the grocery store in a couple weeks, so I still don't have garlic. I ran out of mine. But you can absolutely use garlic. If you have shallots instead of onions, you can use shallots. But either way, some garlic and onion of some sort would be lovely. So I'm just going to go ahead and move those around. Now, as you'll notice, we talked about this last dish with mushrooms as well. Mushrooms are just giant sponges, so they just suck up all the liquid in the pan, and you might think, oh my gosh, I need to add more liquid or it's gonna burn. And you don't, because what happens is as soon as I add salt to this, it's gonna extract all the moisture from the product, and you will see all that yumminess, that moisture come back out into the pan. So you want this to kind of be dry so that these ingredients can really get that nice caramelization or that golden brown and delicious that we love. So I'm gonna go ahead and let these cook down before I add any liquid to the pan or add any seasoning. And then we'll come back and we'll add that in a minute. Okay, our mushrooms are still cooking down and getting nice and golden brown and delicious. So they're almost ready. So what I'm gonna do now is just strain our pasta. And again, I told you about lots of facials I get in the kitchen. Here's the pasta facial. And this is one of my favorites actually. So this is nice and lovely, see? Good for the pores, you know? Gotta get that in there. All right, so we're just straining out these egg noodles, and they're gonna be waiting for us. So as soon as this sauce is ready, these are gonna be ready to go and be poured in to our sauce. Now, you could save a little pasta water. A lot of times I do that in my pasta sauces because it helps the starch from the pasta that came out, actually helps thicken your sauce. But we're using heavy cream in the sauce, so it's gonna be thick enough. Trust me, and a little butter can't hurt, so that's gonna be used too. So I'm just gonna set these here for a minute. They're not gonna be there long. Otherwise, I would add extra virgin olive oil just so they don't all become this big clump of pasta. All right, let's take a look at our onions and mushrooms. Now look at how beautiful they are. See how golden brown and delicious they are. All that nice caramelization. So now I can go ahead and season. So I'm gonna go ahead and season the mushrooms with a little kosher salt and freshly grated pepper. This pepper grinder, by the way, pepper mill, is my favorite. It's one of my favorite gadgets. When I taught at Sur La Table as the resident chef, this was one of our most popular items, and I'm not trying to, I don't work for Kuhn Recon, or Sur La Table anymore, but I do love this pepper grinder, and people ask me about it all the time. You load it from the front, so it's super easy, and then you can adjust the size of the grind down below. But it's super easy on your wrist. You don't have to crank. It's really nice. So that's in there. I'm just going to give this a quick little mix around to incorporate that seasoning. Now the next step to this dish is I'm going to actually deglaze the pan. So I'm going to use our red wine that I'm drinking tonight. And when we talked about this on the last video, whenever you're pouring, especially straight from the bottle, you always want to make sure, and actually let me get my little glove on because this pot's pretty hot, to remove before you add the alcohol, okay? So I'm going to add just about a quarter cup to make those happy little mushrooms. This is another facial, by the way, if you want. This is called one of my most favorite smells in the kitchen. It's the red wine with those onions and mushrooms. It's just, it's heaven, really. So we're going to go ahead and let that reduce down. So it's just kind of, reduce down means most of it's going to evaporate. It's going to kind of reduce down in the liquid. You're not going to see as much liquid. It's going to be soaked into all those yummy mushrooms, and they're super happy right now, taking a little spa bath. What I am going to add at this point is our roast. So I'm going to add the roast in with the au jus, because there is some liquid in there. Go ahead and mix that in there so that can get nice and yummy with that red wine as well. We want happy roast. It's pretty happy roast, but we're making it even happier. It's like euphoria now for this roast. Trust me, guys, this dish, Andy and my son, the next day for leftovers, were literally fighting over it, like the leftovers. So they could not wait for me to make this again. So this is a super big treat tonight for us. And to be honest, I know it's a version of stroganoff. It's definitely not classic, but it's just my take on what we had and what I did in the kitchen. So sometimes the best things come out of, what you have available, or mistakes in the kitchen, or, bananas. I mean, things happen in the kitchen where people just run out of stuff and they're like, let's be creative. So that's what I really love about cooking, is that it does allow you to be creative and have fun in the kitchen, which, let's face it, that's what it's all about, right? So as this cooks down, it is going to cook down a little bit more, but the wine is pretty much all gone. Now it's just the au jus that's in there. So what I'm going to add to just kind of get it going is I am going to add our heavy cream. And I'm just going to add probably about a fourth of a cup too. And let that kind of come together. And as this comes to a boil and I reduce it to a simmer, it actually is going to make the sauce thicker, and it's going to just kind of incorporate all those creamy flavors that are in there right now. It's really rich. This dish is very decadent, so you can't be shy, and this is definitely not a dish you want to eat every day. It's probably pretty caloric as far as that goes, which is why it's a treat, you know, but once in a while it is pretty darn good. So I just add the cream in there. I'm going to add a little bit more pepper and just a tad more salt because we want to make sure we season that sauce as well. Look at that yumminess. Oh, it already looks so good. And then just for color, I did add, or I minced up earlier some parsley, some Italian flat leaf parsley. And what this is parsley dust now. So I minced it really fine, and then I squeezed it in a couple paper towels to get most of the moisture out. And now I'm able to bam, 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 like Emerald, right? So I'm just adding a little in for color, and then I'm gonna save the rest to kind of add at the end just to garnish the plate. So one more ingredient goes into this fabulous sauce. And you can see it's already getting thicker and kind of cooking down. So that's perfect. That's what I want it to be doing. Just to kind of round out the flavor and give the sauce a really nice sheen. But your tongue needs satiation, and fat equals satiation for our tongues. So the heavy cream is definitely a satiation for our tongue to give us that satisfied feeling. But one more thing to just give this sauce a nice rounded finish, and also the shine, is a little bit of butter. So I'm gonna cut off a chunk of butter. Don't look. It is French cooking that I do, you know, that I was trained in. So you are using heavy cream and butter. I'm making all my French professors very proud right now. And so we're just gonna mix that in, and it's just making this very luxurious and decadent. Yum. I just want to dive in there, don't you guys? Yum. All right, so this sauce is done. Like, this is it. This is the yumminess that it's all about. So I'm just going to pour our pasta noodles into the sauce, and then we're going to plate this bad boy up. And I have another little treat that I'm going to share with you guys in a moment. Oh, look at those noodles. There we go. Let me scoop the rest of those out there. I don't want anything being left behind, because trust me, it will be gone. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of work the pasta into the sauce. Oh, and you can use tongs if you want. I love my wooden spoon. It's so nice. So we're just going to gently toss this in because you don't want to break apart the noodles. And I turned off the heat because we don't want our whole sauce disappearing here. And I'm going to kind of break tradition. I know this is a Russian, actually, origin dish, stroganoff. But I am going to add, when I finish this, a little bit of Parmesan cheese because it's kind of fusing right now, Italian and Russian. So I will add a little bit of the Parmesan. Now see how beautiful that is, but I'm glad I saved, because color, it's all about presentation too. So we want to add a little bit more color, at least I do, to this. So now that we have the noodles in there, I mean, look at that. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, the colors. And Andy, hold it right there, and I'm going to grab the Parmesan cheese so that we can add some of that in, because what is pasta without parm, right? So I'm adding some Parmesan cheese in there too. Oh, okay. So our pasta dish is done. And all I'm going to do now is serve it up and then show you and talk about a really special, cool thing that's happening right now with a family in San Juan Capistrano, and how we're supporting their business. It's time to finish our dish and plate it. So I'm just going to scoop a nice hearty helping of this deliciousness our pot roast beef stroganoff onto the plate. Oh, yum. And then come over to finish the dish. And I'm just gonna add a little bit more parm on top and a little bit more parsley dust just around the plate. I mean, look how gorgeous this is. This is like fine dining in your own home, right? It's super easy to do and it looks beautiful. Now, I mentioned earlier I have a special treat. I actually drove over to a fellow chef's house today and his family. His name is Chef Dave, and he works with one of my good friends, Chef Randall, at Driftwood Kitchen in Laguna Beach. And unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, they are closed down right now. And so he's been really just entrepreneurial and decided that he's gonna bake bread. So he's making all these delicious sourdough breads. It's called FKN bread, and it stands for his son's names, his 3 little boys, Finn, Nash, and Kane. And so he and his wife Bree came up with this bread baking company. So I drove over to San Juan today, just across the freeway, to pick up this deliciousness for our dinner tonight and help support his business. Look at this beautiful, this is his rosemary garlic bread. I also got a jalapeno cheddar bread, sourdough bowl, which is amazing. We tasted it earlier. I'm like, oh, that's like my most favorite thing on earth. Like if I died and went to heaven, I just want like sourdough bread and a big slab of butter and I would be a happy camper forever. So this is the perfect crusty bread to serve with this stroganoff because it can sop up all that yummy sauce, or you can serve it with butter, however you want. So I'm just gonna slice up this bread, slice of this here. Oh my gosh, it smells, look at that rosemary and garlic in there. Oh, good job, Dave. This is delicious. It smells amazing. So I'm gonna serve that alongside our dish, and here it is, guys. It's our pot roast beef stroganoff with a beautiful piece of freshly homemade, home-baked, lots of love in this dish, rosemary and garlic sourdough. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you're staying safe, and stay tuned for next week's video. I think I might be doing some baking.